Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back in time. Way back. Before skyscrapers. Before the internet, before that avocado toast you had for brunch. We're journeying to a time of high adventure, raw nature, and questionable personal hygiene. We are going to the Viking Age. And this isn't just a history lesson. Tonight you are the main character. We're going to explore how you would have survived. The air will be cold, the work will be hard, and the stakes will be incredibly high. Now let's have a little reality check right up front. Statistically speaking, you probably wouldn't have survived. You with your soft hands, your 21st century immune system, and your expectation of readily available Wi-Fi would likely have been a historical footnote before you even learned to say skull. But where's the fun in that? Tonight we're assuming you are clever, you are resilient, and you are just a little bit lucky. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support is what keeps these journeys into the past going. And for a bit of fun, drop your location and the local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is tuning in from around the globe as we settle in for the night. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first sensation is confusion, followed immediately by a deep, biting cold that seeps through your clothes. One moment you were... Where were you? The memory is a frustrating wisp of smoke, a feeling of warmth and comfort that now seems a universe away. The next you are here. And here is profoundly terrifyingly different. You are lying on a bed of damp moss and fallen leaves, the earthy, peaty smell filling your nostrils. Towering trees, mostly pines and birches, form a dense canopy overhead, their dark green and silver-white bark looking alien in the weak, filtered light. The air is so clean it almost hurts to breathe, carrying the scent of pine needles, wet soil, and something else. Something smoky and vaguely savory. A gentle mist clings to the ground, swirling around the bases of the trees and muffling all sound. There's no traffic hum, no distant sirens, no hum of a refrigerator. The silence is so absolute it feels heavy, broken only by the drip, drip, drip of condensation, falling from a leaf onto your cheek. You push yourself up, your muscles aching as if from a long, cramped sleep. Your clothes are completely wrong for this environment. They feel flimsy thin and are already becoming soaked with the dampness of the forest floor. You look down at yourself, a stranger in a strange land. Panic begins to bubble in your chest, a cold, sharp-edged thing. Where are you? When are you? The need to move to do something overrides the fear. You pick a direction, it's as good as any other, and start walking. The forest floor is uneven, a treacherous landscape of gnarled roots, slick stones, and hidden dips. Your modern shoes, so practical on pavement, offer a little grip here. You stumble, catching yourself on the rough bark of a pine, its sticky resin clinging to your palm. You are a clumsy, loud creature in this ancient wood, and every snapped twig under your feet sounds like a gunshot in the oppressive quiet. After what feels like an eternity but is probably only 20 minutes, the trees begin to thin. The smoky smell gets stronger, and now you can hear voices. They are low and guttural, a language you don't recognize, but the tone is conversational. Hope, fragile and desperate, flickers within you. People, civilization, help. You creep forward, moving from the cover of one massive trunk to the next, your heart hammering against your ribs. You peer through a final screen of ferns and see it. It's not a town, not a city. It's a small clearing dominated by a single long building. It's immense, made of dark timber with a high-peaked roof, thatched with turf so thick that grass and small wildflowers grow from it. The walls are made of massive vertical planks, and the whole structure seems to hunch into the landscape, solid and imposing. A thin plume of smoke escapes from a hole in the center of its roof. This is a Viking longhouse. You don't know how you know this, but the image is so iconic, so ingrained in cultural memory that there's no doubt. Several people are milling about outside. They are dressed in rough, homespun tunics of wool and linen in muted shades of brown, green, and faded red. They wear leather boots and have belts from which hang knives, small pouches, and other tools. The men are bearded, their hair long and often braided. The women have their hair tied back or covered with a simple cloth. They look strong. Not like models or actors, but like people whose lives are etched into their faces and bodies, broad shoulders, calloused hands, and a steady, watchful way of moving. You are still hidden trying to process the sheer impossibility of your situation. These are Vikings. Real, living Vikings. The academic debate you once read about whether all Norsemen were violent raiders or mostly peaceful farmers and traders seems terribly important right now. You hope desperately for the farmers as you watch two men emerge from the longhouse. They are laughing, clapping each other on the shoulder. One of them is enormous with a great red beard that spills down his chest. The other is leaner with sharp eyes that seem to scan the tree line constantly. And then those eyes stop. They lock directly onto you. There's no flicker of surprise on his face, no shout of alarm, just a sudden, unnerving stillness. He murmurs something to his large companion, and the big man's laughter cuts off. He turns, and his eyes, the color of a winter sky, also fix on your hiding spot. Your blood runs cold. You've been seen. Every instinct screams at you to run, to flee back into the anonymous darkness of the forest. But where would you go? And you know with a certainty that settles deep in your gut that you could never outrun them in this terrain. They belong here. You do not. So you stay frozen, half hidden behind the ferns, your breath caught in your throat. The two men begin to walk towards you. They don't rush. Their pace is deliberate, unhurried, which is somehow more terrifying than a charge. It's the confidence of a predator that knows its prey is cornered. The lean one has a hand resting casually on the hilt of the long knife at his belt. As they get closer, you can see the details. The intricate swirling patterns carved into the handle of the knife. The simple functional brooch that fastens the lean one's cloak. The weave of the wool in the big man's tunic. They are real. This is real. They stop about 10 feet from you. The silence stretches thick with tension. You can hear your own ragged breathing. You have no weapon. You have no knowledge of their language or customs. You are wearing bizarre, flimsy clothes. You are in every conceivable way at their mercy. The lean one speaks. The word is sharp like a stone striking stone. It's a question, but you have no idea what it means. You just stare back your mind a complete blank. You try to look as non-threatening as possible, which isn't hard, given that you are trembling. You slowly raise your empty hands, a gesture you hope is universal for, I am unarmed and mean you no harm. The big red-bearded man grunts a low rumble in his chest. He says something to his friend, gesturing towards you with his chin. The lean one's eyes narrow, taking in your strange attire, your soft, clean hands, your terrified face. He takes another step forward and speaks again, slower this time, pointing at you and then at the ground, as if asking who you are and where you came from. This is your first test, your first crucial choice. Do you try to speak? Do you remain silent? Do you make a run for it despite the odds? Your modern brain, accustomed to solving problems with words and logic, screams to communicate. But what can you say? You open your mouth, but only a dry croaking sound comes out. Seeing your distress, the lean man seems to come to a decision. He gives a short, sharp nod to his companion. Before you can react, the big man lunges forward. He moves with a speed that is shocking for his size. One of his huge hands clamps down on your arm, the grip like a band of iron. You don't even think to struggle. The sheer power is overwhelming. You are lifted half-dragged from the cover of the trees and out into the open clearing. Now everyone can see you. The conversations stop. The work ceases. Every single person, the woman weaving on a vertical loom near the longhouse wall, the old man carving a piece of wood, the children playing a rough-and-tumble game, with a leather ball, all of them turn to stare at you. You are the spectacle. A strange creature pulled from the woods, held fast by the giant called Bjorn, and scrutinized by the watchful one called Leif. You don't know their names yet, but you will. You are a thing of immense curiosity. A few of the braver children creep closer, their eyes wide, pointing at your strange shoes and the weird fabric of your pants. One of the women murmurs something, her gaze critical as she assesses you. You feel less like a person and more like a strange piece of driftwood washed ashore. Leif circles you slowly, his expression unreadable. He reaches out not to harm you, but to touch the sleeve of your shirt. He rubs the material between his thumb and forefinger, his brow furrowed in concentration. He's never felt anything like it. Wool is rough, linen is coarse. This is smooth unnaturally so. It has no discernible weave. He looks at your face, then at your hands. He sees no calluses, no scars from a life of hard labor or combat. You are soft, useless. This is a critical moment. In their world, value is tied to utility. A person is what they can do. Can you wield an axe? Can you mend a net? Can you gut a fish milk? A goat turn wool into thread? Can you fight? Looking at you, the answer to all of these questions appears to be a resounding no. And in this society, a useless mouth to feed is a liability. Liabilities are often discarded. You are dragged towards the great longhouse. The door is a simple, heavy plank of wood. Bjorn pushes it open and you are shoved inside. The change from the misty daylight is dramatic. It takes a moment for your eyes to adjust. The interior is one vast cavernous room. The air is thick with wood smoke, the smell of unwashed bodies cooking meat and damp earth. A long central fire pit runs down the middle of the floor, its embers glowing warmly. There are no chimneys, just a smoke hole in the roof above the fire, and the rafters are black with years of soot. Along the two long walls are raised earthen benches covered with furs and straw, which serve as seating during the day and beds at night. The dim light combined with the smoke makes it hard to see the far end of the hall. This is the home, the communal heart of the family, or perhaps the entire settlement. It houses not just the people, but their lives, their history, and their social structure. And you have just been unwillingly brought into its center. You are pushed down onto one of the benches. Your captors Leif and Bjorn stand over you, speaking in low tones to an older man who has risen to meet them. This man is clearly the chieftain, the patriarch. He is gray-bearded, but his posture is straight and his eyes are sharp and intelligent. He wears a finer tunic than the others and a simple silver ring on his finger. He listens intently to Leif, his gaze occasionally flicking over to you, appraising and cold. This is your interrogation, though. You can't understand a word. Leif is explaining the circumstances of your discovery. He points to your clothes, makes a gesture towards the forest, and shrugs, indicating your mysterious origin. The chieftain, whose name is Hrolf, walks over to you. He looks you up and down, a long, silent assessment. He is weighing your potential. Are you a threat, a spy from another clan, a ghost or a forest spirit, or just a lost, pathetic fool? One of the common historical facts about Vikings is their pragmatism. They were not mindlessly violent. Their actions, even raiding, were often driven by a need for resources, land, or status. Hrolf is being pragmatic now. Killing you is easy, but it gains him nothing. What can be gained from you? He barks an order. A woman comes forward with a wooden cup of water. It is offered to you. Your throat is parched with fear, and you take it gratefully, nodding your thanks. The water is cold and clean. It's a small gesture, but it's not overtly hostile. Your chances of survival may have just ticked up a fraction of a percent. Hrolf makes another decision. He points at you then, at a dark, empty space at the very end of the longhouse, far from the warmth and light of the main fire. Bjorn understands. He grabs your arm again and hauls you to your feet. You are led past the staring faces, past the central hearth, to the coldest, darkest, and lowest status section of the hall. This is where the animals might be kept in winter, or where the least important members of the household sleep. You have been assigned your place. You are for now a thrall, a slave. This is both a disaster and an opportunity. You have lost your freedom. Your life is not your own. You will be expected to work without pay, to obey without question. But you are alive. You are inside, sheltered from the elements, and you have a chance to observe, to learn, and to prove your worth. Bjorn shoves you towards a pile of old straw and burlap sacks in the corner. The message is clear. This is your spot. Stay here. He then turns and stomps back towards the main fire, his duty done. You are left alone in the shadows, your mind reeling. You sink down onto the scratchy straw, the immensity of your predicament washing over you. You have no rights, no status, no skills. You are the lowest of the low. A little-known detail of Viking society is the fluidity of status. While being born a thrall was typically a life sentence, it wasn't impossible for one to gain their freedom. either through being granted it by their master for loyal service or in rare cases by purchasing it if they were allowed to earn personal wealth. It wasn't common, but the path existed. This tiny sliver of historical knowledge is the only comfort you have as you sit in the darkness. For the rest of the day, you are ignored. You watch the life of the longhouse unfold as if you are a ghost. Women prepare the evening meal, stirring a bubbling cauldron over the fire. Men mend tools, sharpening blades on whetstones. The sounds are of work and life, the rhythmic thump-thump of a loom, the murmur of conversation, the crackle of the fire. As dusk falls, the longhouse grows darker, lit only by the glowing hearth and a few simple flickering tallow lamps that give off a greasy, unpleasant smell. The evening meal is served. A thick porridge-like stew or grot is ladled into wooden bowls. It's made of barley and whatever vegetables and meat scraps were available. Everyone gathers around the fire to eat using simple wooden spoons. No one brings you a bowl. The message is clear: if you want to eat, you must earn it. Your stomach growls in protest, but you remain silent in your corner. Hunger is a powerful, clarifying sensation. As the household prepares for sleep, the social order is laid bare. The chieftain Hrolf and his immediate family have the prime sleeping spaces in the middle of the hall, closest to the fire's warmth. Other freemen, the carls like Leif and Bjorn, sleep further down. You are at the absolute bottom of the hierarchy in the cold and the dark. The family settles down, wrapping themselves in woolen blankets and animal pelts on the earthen benches. The fire is banked for the night, its glow dimming to a faint red pulse. The sounds of sleep soon fill the hall: snores, coughs, the rustle of straw. You lie on your pathetic pile of bedding, the cold of the earth seeping into your bones. Sleep feels impossible. Your mind is a frantic whirl of fear, disbelief, and a gnawing, aching hunger. This is your new reality. There's no waking up from this nightmare. Survival is not an abstract concept anymore. It is the only thing that matters, and tomorrow, your first full day as a thrall will begin. You have to find a way to be useful, or you won't see many more nights in this smoky, crowded, terrifying, and wondrous place. You close your eyes, the image of Leif's watchful, assessing gaze burned into your mind. You have to prove him wrong. You are not useless. You will survive. You have to. You are not woken by a gentle alarm or the slow creep of morning light. You are woken by a kick. It's not a brutal, malicious kick, but a sharp, insistent prod to your ribs. Your eyes snap open, and for a disorienting second, you're back in the void of confusion. The memory of your old life, a phantom limb that aches with loss. Then the smell hits you. Stale smoke, unwashed bodies, and the faint, acrid tang of animal dung, and it all comes crashing back. You are in the longhouse. You are a thrall. Looming over you in the pre-dawn gloom is a stern-faced woman. Her hair is gray-streaked and pulled back in a tight, practical bun. Her face is a roadmap of hard work and little joy. This is Astrid Hrolf's wife, the matriarch of the longhouse. She holds a position of considerable power within this domestic sphere, and her expression makes it clear she has no time for idle hands. She barks a single harsh word you don't understand, and points toward the darkest, smelliest end of the hall, where a few goats and a milk cow were sheltered for the night. The meaning, however, is crystal clear. Your first job. Your body screams in protest. Every muscle is a knot of pain from sleeping on the cold, hard earth. Your stomach is a hollow, aching void. But the look in Astrid's eyes is not one you dare to defy. You scramble to your feet, your strange clothes stiff and still damp. She thrusts a short-handled wooden shovel and a large, crudely woven basket into your hands. She points again, more insistently this time, and then turns her back on you, already moving on to her next task, confident in your obedience. The powerless do not have the luxury of refusal. You trudge toward the animal stalls. The stench is overpowering, a thick mixture of ammonia and manure that makes your eyes water. The floor is a sodden mess of soiled straw and animal waste. This is your task: to clean it. You who once considered taking out the kitchen trash a chore are now faced with a task so elemental and foul it feels like a punishment from a vengeful god. You hesitate for a moment, shovel in hand. The cow looks at you with placid, indifferent eyes. A goat bleats a sound that seems to mock your predicament. This is it. This is your life now. You take a breath, trying not to gag, and dig the shovel into the muck. The work is brutally difficult. The shovel is heavy and poorly balanced. The wet straw is dense and clings to the floor. You scrape and lift, trying to get the filth into the basket, but your technique is clumsy. You spill as much as you gather. Your hands, unaccustomed to such labor, are already starting to feel raw against the rough-hewn wood of the handle. Sweat mixes with the grime on your face. After a few pathetic attempts, Bjorn the giant with the red beard stomps past. He's carrying a massive yoke with 2 heavy buckets of water. He pauses, watches you struggle for a second, and lets out a short, barking laugh. It's not friendly. It's a laugh of pure derision. He says something to you, the tone clearly mocking, before continuing on his way. The humiliation is a hot flush on your cheeks, but it's also a motivator. You grit your teeth and work harder, your movements fueled by a spike of angry desperation. You will not be a joke. You develop a rhythm out of necessity. Scrape, lift, dump. Scrape, lift, dump. Your mind goes blessedly blank, focusing only on the physical act. You learn the heavy spots, the slick spots. You learn to use your body weight to drive the shovel. It's still exhausting, disgusting work, but it's becoming manageable. Slowly, painstakingly, the basket fills. It's incredibly heavy. You hoist it up, your arms trembling with the strain, and look around, unsure of what to do with it. One of the other thralls, a gaunt, weary-looking man with the haunted eyes of someone who has seen his home burn, sees your confusion. He says nothing but jerks his head toward the door. The universal signal. You nod your thanks, a flicker of solidarity between the dispossessed. You haul the basket outside into the crisp morning air. The man points to a large steaming compost heap a short distance from the longhouse. The designated spot. You stumble over, empty the basket, and the wave of relief as the weight leaves your arms is almost dizzying. And then you do it again. And again. It takes you hours to clear the small space, a task that one of the seasoned thralls could likely do in a fraction of the time. By the time you scrape the last of the muck from the earthen floor, the sun is higher in the sky and the daily life of the settlement is in full swing. Men are checking fishing nets down by the water, their voices carrying on the wind. The sound of a blacksmith's hammer rings out from a small shed, a steady, rhythmic clang. You are utterly spent. Your back aches, your hands are screaming, and you are coated in a thin layer of filth. You stand there leaning on the shovel, breathing heavily. Astrid comes back to inspect your work. She walks into the now cleared stall, her eyes missing nothing. She kicks at a few stray pieces of straw you missed. She doesn't praise you. Praise is not a currency she deals in, but she gives a single sharp nod. It is the barest minimum of approval, but it feels like winning a medal. She then gestures for you to follow her back to the main hearth. Food. Your entire being focuses on that one thought. A large iron cauldron sits over the fire, bubbling with the same barley porridge, the grot from last night. But this time, a bowl is thrust into your hands. It's a simple wooden vessel worn smooth with use. Astrid ladles a measure of the thick, steaming substance into it. It's not a generous portion, but it's more than you had any right to expect. You are given a spoon. You find a spot on the floor away from the freemen carls who sit on the benches, and you eat. You have never tasted anything so good in your entire life. The grot is bland, its flavor coming mostly from a few bits of salted fish and whatever root vegetables were thrown in. But it is hot, it is substantial, and it is a shield against the gnawing hunger that has been your constant companion. You eat slowly, deliberately savoring every spoonful. This is survival distilled into its purest form. You earned this. With sweat and filth, you earned the right to this bowl of tasteless, life-giving mush, and as you eat, you watch, you learn. The social structure of the longhouse is a living, breathing thing. You see Hrolf the chieftain sitting in the high seat in the middle of the hall. He is discussing something with Leif, the watchful one who found you. Their conversation is serious, and Leif uses a piece of charcoal to draw a shape, a coastline, perhaps on a piece of cured hide. They are planning something, a trade journey, a raid. The free men, the carls, form the core of the household. Men like Bjorn who own their own farms or serve the chieftain as warriors and skilled laborers. They speak with a casual authority. They laugh loudly, and they move with the confidence of men who know their place and their rights. Their wives and children share this status. You see a woman, one of Bjorn's kin, teaching her daughter to spin wool using a drop spindle, her hands moving with a practiced hypnotic grace. And then there are the thralls. There are four others besides you. The gaunt man who helped you, whose name you learn is Finian, a Celtic name. He was likely captured in a raid on Ireland. There is a pair of young women from a Slavic tribe to the east, taken in a skirmish over a trade route. And there is an old broken man who seems to have been a thrall his entire life. They move in the background, silent and efficient. They are the invisible machinery that keeps the household running. They fetch the water, stoke the fire, grind the barley, and do every other thankless task. They speak little and never to the carles unless spoken to. Their world is one of orders and labor, and it is now your world. You are beginning to understand the three great tiers of the society. At the top are the nobles and chieftains, the jarls like Hrolf. They command, they lead, they own the most land and wealth. Below them are the carls, the free farmers and warriors, the backbone of the Norse world. They have a voice, they have rights, and they can attend the local assembly, the thing, to settle disputes and make laws. And at the very bottom are the thralls, you, property, human tools. Historians still debate the degree of autonomy a thrall might have. Some sagas tell of trusted thralls who managed estates or were granted their freedom after years of service. Archaeological evidence sometimes suggests they had their own meager possessions. But looking at the exhausted, empty faces of your fellow thralls, you suspect those cases were the exception, not the rule. For most, this was a life sentence of hard labor with little hope of escape. Your bowl is empty. The brief respite is over. Another task is waiting. This time, it's water. Astrid points to the heavy wooden yoke Bjorn was carrying earlier, and then towards the door. The message is clear. You shoulder the yoke, its weight digging into your shoulders. It's designed for someone broader and stronger than you. The two buckets are enormous. You stagger outside and follow the well-worn path leading away from the longhouse. The path winds downhill toward the sound of running water. You emerge from the trees onto the shore of a breathtaking fjord. The water is a deep, dramatic blue, reflecting the steep, dark cliffs that plunge directly into it. The air is salty and clean. In the distance, you can see the fjord opening up to the vast gray sea. It's a vista of such raw, majestic beauty that it momentarily stops you in your tracks. It's also a cage. The cliffs are impassable, the sea is a death sentence for a non-swimmer. And the forest behind you is a mystery. The beauty is a prison wall. You fill the buckets from a fast-flowing stream that tumbles down the hillside and into the fjord. The water is achingly cold. The weight is immense. You struggle to lift the yoke, staggering under the load. The water sloshes over the rims of the buckets, soaking your legs and making the path slick. The return journey up the hill is a nightmare. You have to stop every 20 feet, your lungs burning, your shoulders screaming in protest. Your modern sedentary body is failing you. It takes you an embarrassingly long time to get back to the longhouse. You can feel the eyes of others on you, a mixture of pity and contempt. You finally manage to haul the water inside, spilling a good portion of it on the floor, which earns you a sharp scolding from Astrid. You have completed the task, but you have failed the execution. Your next job is wood. You are led to a large pile of logs and handed a heavy, long-handled axe. Your guide is one of the younger carls, a boy of maybe 16 named Gunnar. He has the easy confidence of youth and a casual cruelty in his eyes. He demonstrates the technique with a few powerful expert swings. The axe bites deep into the wood and the log splits cleanly in two. He hands the axe to you with a smirk. You who have probably never held an axe in your life are now expected to split logs for firewood. You try to mimic his stance, his swing. You lift the heavy axe aim and bring it down. The blow lands off-center with a dull thud, barely scratching the wood. The axe head glances off and embeds itself in the dirt, jarring your arms. Gunnar laughs. It's the same derisive sound you heard from Bjorn. You try again. And again. Your swings are clumsy, inefficient, and dangerous. You are more of a threat to your own shins than to the log. After several minutes of pathetic flailing, you manage to split a single small piece of wood. You are sweating exhausted and your hands are now blistering. Gunnar, bored of the spectacle, simply shakes his head, grabs the axe from you, and with a few effortless swings, splits a dozen logs. He points to the pile of split wood and then to the longhouse. Your job is not to split, but to carry. You are too useless for skilled labor. You spend the next hour hauling stacks of firewood, your arms aching, your spirit shrinking with every trip. You are trapped in a cycle of failure. Every task reveals another inadequacy, another way in which you are unsuited for this world. The initial fear of yesterday is being replaced by a gnawing dread. How can you survive if you can't do anything useful? As you stack the last of the wood inside, you notice Leif, the watchful one, again. He's not looking at you. He's observing Gunnar, who is now showing off splitting logs with theatrical flair. Leif says something quiet and sharp. Gunnar's showboating stops instantly. He visibly straightens up his expression, becoming serious and respectful. Leif takes the axe, demonstrates a finer point of the technique, a slight shift in the hips, a different angle of the blade, and then hands it back. Gunnar nods chastened and resumes his work with a new focused efficiency. You realize something important. Leif is not just a warrior, he's a teacher. He values precision, efficiency, and skill. He despises waste, whether it's wasted movement or wasted opportunity. And he saw you. He saw your pathetic attempt with the axe. His judgment of you as useless is likely even more entrenched now. The day wears on in a blur of menial tasks. You are sent to help Finian turn over the soil in the small vegetable garden with a crude wooden spade. You have no common language, but you work side by side in a companionable silence, born of a shared misery. You are tasked with scrubbing the inside of a foul-smelling barrel. You are ordered to hold a goat still while one of the women milks it. You are a pair of hands, nothing more. Late in the afternoon, you're given a bucket and sent to the shore to gather mussels from the rocks at low tide. This at least is a task you can manage. As you pry the sharp-shelled mollusks from the rocks, your blistered fingers stinging from the salt water, you have a moment to yourself. You look out at the fjord again. A longship is moored there, its high arching prow carved into the shape of a serpent's head. Its single square sail is furled around the mast. It's a thing of terrifying beauty and purpose. It's the vessel that brought Finian and the Slavic girls here. It's the reason this settlement can be both a thriving farmstead and a den of pirates. It represents the duality of this culture, the farmer and the raider, the creator and the destroyer. While you're working, you spot a problem. One of the small leather and wood buckets used for carrying water from the stream has a leak. It's a steady drip, drip, drip from a seam near the bottom. The others just seem to accept it, filling it and walking faster to minimize the loss. But your modern brain, your problem-solving brain, sees an inefficiency. You remember seeing a pot of pine pitch, a black sticky resin used for waterproofing boats, near where the men were mending the nets. This is your chance, a small one but a chance nonetheless. When you return with the mussels, you don't wait to be told. On your own initiative, you find the leaky bucket. You take it over to the pot of pitch, which is still warm. You find a small flat stick. You carefully, methodically work the sticky tar-like substance into the leaky seam, both inside and out. It's messy work, and your hands are now covered in pitch on top of the blisters and grime. But you create a solid waterproof seal. You leave the bucket to dry. No one saw you do it. It was a secret act of competence. An hour later, you see one of the Slavic thrall girls go to fetch water. She unknowingly picks up the bucket you repaired. You watch your heart in your throat. She fills it at the stream and begins the walk back. You see her pause. She looks down at the bucket. It is not dripping. A flicker of confusion crosses her face. She looks at the bottom, sees the fresh black pitch, and then her eyes scan the settlement, wondering who did it. She doesn't see you watching. She just shrugs and continues her task, her work now slightly easier. You didn't get praise. You didn't get a reward. But you feel a flicker of something you haven't felt since you arrived, a sense of accomplishment. You solved a problem. You made something better. It's a tiny, insignificant victory in the grand scheme of things, but it's yours. That evening, as the household gathers for the meal, the atmosphere is different. There is an energy and anticipation. Hrolf makes a pronouncement from his high seat. He speaks for some time, his voice booming through the hall. Though you don't understand the words, you see the reactions. The Carls cheer and bang their fists on the benches. Bjorn grins a feral, wolfish expression. Leif's face remains calm, but his eyes have a new intensity. The plan they were making is now public. A journey is coming. You are given your portion of grot this time with a small chunk of dried meat in it, a reward for a day of labor. As you eat, you feel Leif's eyes on you. He is sitting on a bench across the fire, sharpening a long, wicked-looking knife. His gaze is no longer dismissive. It's calculating. He is reevaluating you. Perhaps the girl mentioned the fixed bucket. Perhaps he simply noticed you doing something without being ordered to. Whatever the reason, his perception of you has shifted, however slightly. You are no longer just the soft one. You are the soft one who fixes things. That night, as you lie on your pile of straw, the exhaustion is bone deep. It's a totality of fatigue that pushes out the fear. Your body is a symphony of aches, but your mind is clearer. You survived your first day of work. You ate. You found your place on the lowest rung of a ladder that reaches up into the smoky darkness of the rafters. You learned that survival here isn't just about strength. It's about observation, about finding a way, any way to be of value. You fixed a bucket. Tomorrow, maybe you'll find another problem to solve. And another, and another. It's a slow, grueling path, but for the first time, you can see that a path might exist. You fall into a deep, dreamless sleep, the sleep of the truly spent, the sounds of the longhouse, a strange and terrifying lullaby. The days begin to bleed into one another, each a copy of the last, distinguished only by the type of ache in your muscles and the specific menial task set before you. The sharp, piercing terror of your arrival has dulled, ground down by the relentless rhythm of daily life into a constant low-grade anxiety. This is the grind. It is not the stuff of sagas, not the epic tales of bearded heroes crossing storm-tossed seas. It is the silent, unwritten story of survival told in calluses, aching backs, and the endless cycle of chores that keep starvation at bay. Your morning routine is now as ingrained as breathing. You wake in the cold, smoky dark before the sun, not to a kick anymore, but to the general stirring of the longhouse. You've learned to anticipate the need rising on your own to add wood to the embers of the central hearth, a small proactive act that keeps Astrid's sharp tongue at bay. You are learning the first and most important rule of being a thrall: be useful and invisible. Breakfast is the same bowl of barley grot. You no longer find it delicious, nor do you find it disgusting. It is simply fuel. You eat it quickly, silently, knowing that its warmth is all that will stand between you and the bone-deep chill of the morning's work. You have come to appreciate the profound honesty of this life. There is no pretense. You work, you eat. You fail to work, you do not eat. It is a simple, brutal calculus. Your tasks are varied now. Leif, in his role as the farmstead's brutally efficient manager, seems to have realized that you are a disaster with an axe. Instead of assigning you to tasks requiring brute strength or inherent martial skill, he begins to use you as a utility player, a gap filler in the great machine of the household. This means you are sent wherever a pair of hands is needed, which gives you a comprehensive ground-level education in how this world functions. Some days are spent in the fields. The settlement doesn't have vast, sprawling farmlands, but rather a collection of small, irregularly shaped plots, carved out of the forest wherever the soil is decent. Viking Age agriculture, as you're learning firsthand, is a constant battle. Historians debate the exact productivity of their farming techniques, whether they were sophisticated enough for large surpluses, or if they lived perpetually on the edge of subsistence. From what you see, Hrolf's farmstead lies somewhere in the anxious middle. A good harvest means wealth security and a comfortable winter. A bad harvest, a week of too much rain. A blight and early frost means hunger, weakness, and a desperation that could easily spill over into violence against their neighbors. You are given an ard, a light, primitive scratch plow, usually pulled by an ox or a pair of them. Your job is not to guide the ox, which requires a skill you don't possess, but to follow behind the plow, pulling out the larger rocks and roots it churns up. You heave the stones to the edge of the field, where they are used to build up the low walls that surround it. The work is backbreaking. You spend hours bent over your eyes scanning the dark, turned earth, your fingers raw from gripping and tossing rocks. By the end of the day, your back is a single solid sheet of pain. But you also learn. You learn the feel of good soil versus poor clay-heavy soil. You see the women following behind you, breaking up the larger clods of earth with heavy wooden mallets. You see Hrolf himself walking the edges of the field, his expression grim, crumbling the soil in his hand as if trying to read the future in it. You understand in a way you never could from a book that the earth is their partner and their adversary, the source of all life and all anxiety. Other days are for the fjord. The sea is their other great provider. While the longship sits moored like a sleeping predator, most of the day-to-day fishing is done from the shore or from small, unstable-looking boats. Your least favorite task is mending the nets. You are seated in a shed that reeks of fish oil and salt, a massive tangled pile of netting before you. Finian, the Irish thrall, is the expert here. His long, thin fingers move with a speed and precision that is mesmerizing. He tries to show you. He hands you a bone needle threaded with twine made from nettles or flax and points to a rip. The work is maddeningly intricate. The knots are complex, and pulling them tight with cold, stiff fingers is a special kind of frustration. Your first few attempts are clumsy messes, loose and uneven. Bjorn walks by, sees your pathetic handiwork, and scoffs, calling you all thumbs. The name or a version of it sticks for a while. It's another small humiliation, another reminder of your incompetence. But Finian is patient. He doesn't speak, but he will undo your bad knot with a sigh and retie it correctly. His movement's slow so you can follow. Slowly, you get it. You learn the rhythm, the way to loop the twine the right amount of tension. Your men's are still ugly compared to his, but they are functional. They will hold. One terrifying afternoon you are ordered into a boat. It's not the mighty longship, but a tiny round vessel called a coracle made of animal hide stretched over a wicker frame. It seems impossibly flimsy. You and one of the younger Carls are tasked with checking the fish traps set in the shallows of the fjord. The boy paddles with an easy, confident stroke while you cling to the sides, your knuckles white. The coracle bobs and spins on the water, and you feel profoundly unsafe. You, a person who probably thought nothing of flying in a metal tube at 30,000 feet, are terrified by this primitive boat. It's a lesson in perspective. The boy laughs at your fear, of course. For him, the water is a second home. For you, it's a cold, dark abyss. But the traps are full. You pull them up to reveal a writhing mass of silver-scaled fish cod and herring mostly. The boy dispatches them with a quick, brutal efficiency, and soon the bottom of the boat is filled with the catch. The sight of this bounty, this protein-rich harvest from the sea, connects another dot in your understanding of this place. The land and the sea. The plow and the net. These are the twin pillars holding up this society. On days when the weather is poor, you work inside or under the eaves of the longhouse. It is here you are introduced to the stinking, vital world of textile production. You knew academically that their clothes were made of wool and linen. You never considered the staggering amount of labor involved. Your first lesson is in cleaning raw wool. It arrives sheared from the sheep in greasy, filthy clumps full of dirt, twigs, and lanolin. Your job is to wash it. The best cleaning agent you discover with horror is stale urine, which the household collects in a barrel for this specific purpose. The ammonia acts as a powerful degreaser. You spend an entire day with your hands plunged in a wooden tub full of this foul-smelling concoction, scrubbing the wool until it is clean. The stench clings to you for days. It's a humbling, gag-inducing job, but as you see the clean, soft wool laid out to dry, ready for the spinners with their drop spindles, you see the magic of it. You have helped turn filth into the raw material for warmth and comfort. These tasks teach you more than just skills. They teach you the language, not in a formal sense, but through the brute force of repetition. When Astrid wants water, she points and yells, "Vand!" When Leif wants you to move faster, he growls, "Hurtig." You learn the words for tools, Ux, axe, niv, knife, hamar, hammer. You learn the names of animals, cacao-geet, goat, fisk, fish. You learn simple commands, hent, fetch, come, go, go. You start to piece together the rhythm and cadence of Old Norse. You can't hold a conversation, but you can understand orders. You can grasp the gist of the chatter around the fire. You hear Bjorn boasting about a feat of strength. You hear women gossiping about a neighboring farmstead. You hear Hrolf and Leif discussing the price of furs in a distant market. The world is slowly coming into focus, the muffled sounds sharpening into understandable concepts. This small progress is a lifeline. It makes you feel less like an alien and more like a person, albeit a very lowly one. As you become more integrated into the daily grind, you also learn more about the things they create and use. One afternoon, you watch the old broken thrall, the one who seems to have been born into this life, patiently carving a block of soft, grayish green stone. He's using a simple iron knife, slowly hollowing it out. You realize he's making a cooking pot. You touch a finished one sitting near the fire. It's heavy and smooth. This is soapstone, a wonderfully practical material easy to carve and excellent at holding and distributing heat. They make pots, bowls, lamps, and loom weights from it. It's a piece of simple, ingenious technology that you had never heard of another example of how these people mastered their environment using only what was at hand. Your own body is changing. The softness that Leaf first noted is gone, boiled away by labor. Your hands are no longer your own. They are tools mapped with blisters that have turned into thick, protective calluses. Your back and shoulders, once perpetually sore, have settled into a state of permanent, low-level ache that you've learned to ignore. You are leaner, tougher. When you catch your reflection in a bucket of water, you see a stranger staring back thinner, with a haunted look in the eyes, but also harder, more resilient. The 21st century you is a ghost a dream you once had. This grimy, weary figure is who you are now. This physical transformation is mirrored by a mental one. The constant high-pitched panic has been replaced by a thrall's cunning. You've learned to read the moods of your masters. You know to make yourself scarce when Hrolf is in a temper. You know that a quiet word of praise from Astrid for a well-scoured pot is worth more than an hour of rest. You learn to anticipate needs fetching a tool before it's asked for adding wood to a dying fire without being told. You learn that the path to better treatment, or at least less punishment, is to make yourself so quietly essential that your absence would be an inconvenience. Your relationship with the other high-status members of the Hall evolves subtly. Bjorn still treats you with casual contempt, but his insults are less frequent. He once saw you haul a load of wet timber that made you stagger but not fall, and you saw a flicker of something other than mockery in his eyes. Maybe not respect, but a grudging acknowledgement of effort. Astrid's default demeanor toward you is still one of stern impatience, but she no longer watches your every move, confident you will do your assigned task without trying to shirk it. It is Leif who remains the most significant presence. He is the overseer, the strategist, the one who sees the entire farmstead as a complex system. He notices everything. He noticed your ugly but functional net repairs. He noticed you stopped fumbling with the water yoke. He is the one who directs you to new tasks testing your abilities. One day he has you spend hours turning a grindstone while he sharpens a half-dozen axe heads. The work is monotonous, but you watch him marveling at the skill in his hands as he holds the blade to the spinning stone at the perfect angle, creating a razor-sharp edge. He doesn't speak to you, but you feel like you are his apprentice, learning through observation. The culmination of this grueling education comes one evening. A section of the fishing net has a large, complex tear a series of rips that threaten to unravel the whole thing. It's a job that would normally fall to Finian, but he is laid up with a fever, shivering in the corner under a pile of furs. Astrid holds up the damaged net, her expression grim. A day without the net is a day without a major source of food. Leif looks at the net, then his eyes scan the hall. They pass over the other thralls, over the carls who would consider this work beneath them. And then they land on you. He doesn't give an order. He just looks at you and then pointedly at the damaged net. It's a question, a challenge. Can you do this? Can you? Your heart hammers in your chest. All your clumsy, frustrating hours of practice have led to this moment. You nod a single sharp dip of your chin. You take the net. You sit in your usual spot, your back to the wall. You pick up the bone needle and a spool of twine. The entire household is in the longhouse, their evening conversations a low hum in the background. But you feel like you are on a stage. You know Leif is watching you from across the hearth. You ignore the pressure. You focus only on the task. You start at the edge of the tear, your fingers moving with a newfound confidence. You tie the first knot, the one Finian showed you, the one that anchors the repair. It holds. You begin to weave the needle back and forth, recreating the diamond pattern of the net. Your hands are no longer fumbling. They know the way. The calluses protect you from the roughness of the twine. It takes hours. The light from the fire begins to dim. The longhouse grows quiet as people begin to settle down for the night. But you keep working. Your world shrunk to the small section of net in your hands. You finish the last knot, pulling it tight. You inspect your work. It's not as elegant as Finian's would be. The patch is visibly thicker and rougher than the original netting around it, but it is strong, it is solid, it will work. You are exhausted, your eyes burning from the smoke and concentration. You look up. Most of the household is asleep. But Leif is still awake, sitting on his bench, polishing a leather strap. He has been watching you the whole time. You hold up the net. He gets up and walks over. He takes it from you without a word. He runs his thumb over your repair, testing the knots, stretching the patch section. The silence stretches on and you brace yourself for criticism. He doesn't criticize it. He doesn't praise it. He just inspects it thoroughly, his face unreadable in the dim, flickering light. Finally, he gives a single low grunt. It's a sound of acknowledgement, of completion. He folds the net neatly and places it with the other fishing gear. Then he turns and goes to his sleeping bench without a backward glance. It is the greatest praise you have ever received. That grunt tells you everything. You are no longer all thumbs. You are no longer the useless one. You are a functional part of this world. You have a skill, however minor. You can fix the net. You have survived another day, and you have earned your place for tomorrow. You crawl to your straw pile, the familiar ache in your back, a comforting presence. The grind of daily life has not broken you. It has forged you into something new. Your life has found its groove, a deep and wearying rut carved by the relentless turning of the days. The language of labor is now your mother tongue. You understand the heft of an axe, the ache of the plow, the sting of salt water in a cut. You have mastered the geography of physical survival. But now you begin to perceive a new landscape, one far more treacherous and unseen. It is the world of beliefs, of honor, of oaths and laws, a web of invisible threads that holds this society together. A misstep here, you realize, is far more dangerous than tripping on a root. A broken tool can be mended. A broken taboo can get you killed. Your education begins subtly. You start noticing the small rituals that pepper the day, actions so ingrained in the others that they are performed without thought. You see Astrid before she begins to bake the day's bread, spill a small handful of flour into the corner of the hearth, her lips moving in a silent murmur. You see Bjorn before taking a drink of ale pour a splash onto the earth. They are small offerings, acknowledgments of unseen forces. One morning you see Astrid carry a small wooden bowl of fresh milk, not to the table but outside. You follow at a discreet distance, your curiosity piqued. She goes to a tall, weathered wooden post near the edge of the clearing. The post is old, its top carved into a crude, stylized face with wide, staring eyes. It is not a menacing carving, just watchful. Astrid places the bowl of milk at the base of the post, bows her head for a moment, and walks back to the longhouse without a backward glance. This is for the landvetter, the spirits of the land. You don't know their name yet, but you understand the intent. It is a payment, a sign of respect, a plea for the land to continue providing its bounty. You learn that this world is crowded, inhabited, not just by people and animals, but by a whole host of spirits, elves, and dwarves, who must be appeased. To them, the land is not a thing to be owned, but a living entity to be negotiated with. You begin to hear the names of the great gods invoked in daily conversation. When a thunderstorm rolls in from the sea, its thunder echoing between the cliffs of the fjord, the men will grip their axe handles and mutter, "Thor!" Thor. You see his symbol everywhere, a simple, powerful shape like an anchor, a hammer Mjolnir. It is scratched into the timbers of the longhouse, carved into the handles of tools, and worn as an amulet around the necks of men like Bjorn. Thor is the god of the common man, the protector of humanity against the forces of chaos, the giants. His presence is felt as a raw physical power, a bulwark against the storm. When Hrolf and Leif speak of their upcoming voyage, you hear another name, Odin. Odin. He is a different kind of god. His name is spoken with a mixture of reverence and fear. He is the All-Father, the god of wisdom, poetry, and magic, but also the god of war frenzy and the glorious dead who feast in Valhalla. He is a fickle wandering and often cruel deity. To invoke Odin is to court victory, but also to acknowledge the possibility of a bloody end. You learn that to be a warrior in this world is to walk in Odin's shadow. And you hear the women when they are planting seeds in the garden or praying for an easy childbirth whisper the name Freya. She is the goddess of love, beauty, fertility, and a powerful form of magic called satyr. She too has a darker side, claiming half of the slain warriors for her own hall. These are not distant, abstract gods. They are active participants in the world, their moods and wills reflected in the harvest, the weather, and the fortunes of man. You, of course, do not believe. Your 21st century mind is a fortress of rationalism, but you learn to respect their belief. To scoff to show disbelief would be an insult of the highest order, a foolish act of provocation against the very foundations of their reality. The reality of this belief is driven home when Finian's fever worsens. He lies on his straw pallet, shivering uncontrollably one moment and burning with heat the next. The simple herbal remedies Astrid prepares for him have no effect. A shadow of fear falls over the longhouse. A strong thrall is a valuable asset. His loss would be a blow to the household's productivity. But more than that, an unchecked sickness could spread. After 2 days with no improvement, Hrolf makes a decision. He sends Gunnar the young Carl on a day-long journey to a neighboring settlement. 2 days later, a visitor arrives. She is a vulva Asiris. She is ancient, her face a web of wrinkles from which a pair of startlingly bright, intelligent eyes peer out. She leans heavily on a staff which is unadorned except for a pouch of herbs tied near the top. She is treated with a profound respect that borders on fear. Even Hrolf the chieftain inclines his head to her. You are made to feel your thrall status more keenly than ever. While the freemen and women of the hall gather to watch the ritual, you and the other thralls are expected to be utterly still and silent, to not even let your shadows fall in the wrong place. You find a spot in the deepest darkness of the hall, a ghost at a holy ceremony. The vulva begins. She does not perform grand theatrical magic. This is satyr of folk magic rooted in tradition. She has the others build up the fire. She chants in a low, monotonous hum the words ancient and hypnotic. She casts a handful of dried herbs onto the flames, which release a thick, sweet-smelling smoke that fills the hall. She takes her staff and slowly walks around Finian, tapping the ground at his head, his hands, his feet. She enters a trance, her eyes rolling back in her head, her body swaying. She begins to speak in a high, wavering voice, not a chant now, but a string of pronouncements. You cannot understand the words, but you see the effect on the others. They lean in their faces, rapt, hanging on her every syllable. She is seeing things, speaking with spirits, diagnosing the invisible cause of Finian's illness. After what feels like an eternity, she falls silent, her body slumping. She seems utterly drained. She gives Astrid a quiet list of instructions, a specific combination of herbs to be boiled a rune, to be carved on a piece of wood and placed under Finian's sleeping furs. She is given the best food and drink the household has to offer, and a payment of silver coins. Then she is gone. Whether it was the vulva's magic or simply the fever breaking on its own, Finian begins to recover the next day. The event teaches you a vital lesson. For these people, the world is layered. Below the surface of the physical is a deeper reality of spirits and magic, and there are specialists who can navigate it. Just as you are beginning to grasp the spiritual laws, you are introduced to the secular ones. The catalyst is, as it so often is, a dispute between young men. Gunnar, puffed up with the pride of being sent on the errand to fetch the vulva, tries to pull rank on another young Carl named Kalin over the use of a particularly fine whetstone. An argument erupts. Voices are raised. It is not just about the whetstone. You see that instantly. It's about status, about reputation. In a society without a formal police force, a man standing in the community, his honor is his primary defense. Gunnar insults Kalin, questioning his strength. Kalin retorts by mocking Gunnar's skill with a bow. The insults become more pointed. They are circling each other, verbally testing the limits. Leif, who has been watching from a distance, steps in. He doesn't shout. His voice is low and cold. He tells them their squabbling is childish and dishonors Hrolf's hall. The word dishonor hangs in the air. He warns them that if they continue, they risk being called a knighting, a villain, a man without honor. The word is like a physical blow. You see both young men flinch. To be a knighting is to be a social outcast, a man whom anyone could kill without penalty. It is the ultimate insult, the nuclear option of Viking verbal warfare. The dispute is paused but not resolved. The air between the two young men remains thick with resentment. This, you learn, cannot be left to fester, especially not with Hrolf and his best warriors planning to be away on their voyage. An unstable community is a vulnerable one. Hrolf declares that the matter will be settled at the local thing. The thing is held a few days later. It is not a building, but a large open meadow on a hill overlooking the fjord, marked by a circle of large stones. All the freemen from Hrolf's settlement and several neighboring farmsteads attend. It is a social event as much as a legal one. Women and children come, and there is food and drink. But at its heart, it is serious business. As a thrall, you have no voice. You are property, and property cannot participate in the law. But you are ordered to come along with the other thralls to carry food, serve ale, and tend the fire. Once again, your lowly status gives you a perfect vantage point. You are invisible, and the invisible see everything. Hrolf presides seated on a large carved chair brought for the occasion. He is the law speaker for this local assembly. He begins the proceedings by reciting the law. Not from a book writing is for runes of dedication or magic, not for lengthy legal codes, but from memory. He speaks of the laws of theft, of land boundaries, of marriage, and of insults. It is a stunning feat of memorization, a living tradition passed down through generations. Then the case of Gunnar versus Kalin is brought forward. Each man stands in the center of the circle and tells his side of the story. They don't just state facts, they boast of their own accomplishments and belittle their opponent. What matters is not just what happened, but who has the better reputation. After they speak, they call on their oath helpers. These are friends or kinsmen who will swear an oath not that they witnessed the event, but that the man they support is honorable and trustworthy. Bjorn speaks for Gunnar. An older, respected farmer from another settlement speaks for Kalin. Oaths are sworn upon a sacred silver arm ring, which is kept by Hrolf and is said to be slick with the blood of sacrificed animals. To swear a false oath on the ring is to invite the wrath of the gods upon yourself and your kin for all time. It is a terrifying prospect. After the oaths are heard, the freemen discuss the case amongst themselves. The murmur of voices rises and falls. Finally, Hrolf calls for a judgment. The freemen decide that both men were at fault for letting their pride get the better of them. They are each required to pay a fine, a small amount of silver to the other, as compensation for the insult. Honor is satisfied. They are made to shake hands and share a drink of ale in front of everyone. The social fabric has been mended. You watch all of this with a kind of awe. It is messy, it is personal, and it is deeply rooted in community standing. But it works. It resolves disputes and prevents them from escalating into the blood feuds that could tear a community apart. You learn that in this world, law is a public performance. While you are refilling a jug with ale, you are close enough to overhear Leif talking quietly with Hrolf. They are discussing the judgment, and Hrolf is pleased with the outcome. Leif agrees, and then, almost as an afterthought, he gestures dismissively in your direction. The Silent One is learning. He says to Hrolf, his voice low but clear. He watches. Hrolf grunts, not really listening, his attention already elsewhere. But you have heard it. Your heart gives a jolt. He has noticed you. He has noticed your constant silent observation. And he did not interpret it as insolence or laziness, but as learning. For the first time, someone in a position of power has acknowledged that you have a mind, not just a pair of hands. It is a terrifying and exhilarating thought. Your ability to fade into the background, to watch and learn without being seen, is not a weakness but a strength. It is your unique skill, the one thing you possess that these powerful, strong people do not. It is your own form of magic, your own key to survival in this complex, dangerous world of gods and laws. As you walk back to the longhouse, the setting sun casting long shadows, you feel a new kind of hope. You are still a thrall, but you are no longer just a victim of this world. You are becoming a student of it. You have begun to master the invisible rules. You understand the gods, you respect the laws, you have learned the complex dance of honor and shame. You feel a fragile sense of security as if you've finally learned the basic grammar of your new reality. And that is precisely when this world reminds you that its most fundamental rule is brutally simple. Your body is fragile, and the world is full of sharp edges. Your lesson in pre-modern medicine begins not with a glorious battle wound, but with a moment of stupid, mundane carelessness. You are helping to gut a large catch of cod down by the shore. The work is slimy, smelly, and monotonous. Your hands are slick with fish guts, and the short, sharp knife, the knife that is every person's constant companion, is slippery in your grasp. For a split second, your attention wavers. Perhaps it's a shout from the top of the hill, or the cry of a gull, or just a momentary lapse born of fatigue. The knife slips. It slices across the palm of your non-dominant hand, a deep, clean cut that parts the flesh with shocking ease. The pain is sharp and immediate, but it's secondary to the sight of the blood. It wells up instantly, a shockingly bright red against the grime and fish scales on your skin. It drips down your wrist, pooling on the cold, wet stones. Your first thought is a 21st century one: I need to wash this. I need antiseptic. I need a bandage. Your second thought, a cold wave of pure Viking Age terror, follows immediately: I am going to die. Here a cut is not an inconvenience. It is an open door. An invitation to every foulness of this world, the dirt, the grime, the animal filth on the ground, the unseen microbes in the water to come inside and fester. An infection is not something you treat with a course of antibiotics. It is a battle fought in the dark by your own body, a battle that is very often lost. Kalen, the young man you saw argue at the thing, is working beside you. He sees the blood and lets out a low whistle. He says something you don't quite catch, but the tone is a mixture of pity and morbid interest. He calls up to the longhouse, and a few minutes later Astrid appears, wiping her hands on her apron. She comes over and inspects the wound, her expression grim and practical. There is no gentle sympathy in her eyes, only a clinical assessment of a damaged piece of household property. You are a tool, and you have been broken. Her job is to see if you can be fixed. She barks an order at you. You are to come with her. You stumble back up the path to the longhouse, clutching your bleeding hand to your chest, leaving a small trail of crimson droplets on the path. Your mind is racing. You remember the stories you've read about gangrene, about sepsis, about people dying in agony from a simple scratch from a rose thorn. Those were abstract concepts then. They are terrifyingly real now. Astrid takes you not to the main hearth, but to a corner of the longhouse that serves as her domain. Here she keeps bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters, clay pots filled with salves and rolls of cleaned linen. This is her apothecary, the arsenal in her endless war against injury and illness. First, the wound must be cleaned, but there is no sterile saline, no bottle of iodine. She takes a clay mug and fills it from a barrel of ale that has gone sour. She pours the stale vinegary liquid directly into your open wound. The pain is blinding. It's a fire that consumes your entire hand, and you cry out a sharp, involuntary yelp. Astrid pays your pain no mind. She is not being cruel. She is being practical. The acidity of the sour ale will clean out the worst of the filth. She scrubs at the cut with a coarse piece of linen, her movements efficient and rough. Once she is satisfied that the wound is clean, the bleeding must be stopped. She takes a wad of something that looks like dried leaves from a pouch, puts it in her own mouth, and chews it into a wet green pulp. She then spits this herbal concoction directly onto your cut and presses down hard. You recoil in disgust, but her grip is like iron. This is a yarrow poultice. You will later learn that yarrow was called militaris herba by ancient peoples, the military herb, for its incredible ability to staunch blood flow. Right now, all you know is that your master's spittle is being used as first aid. Next comes the bandage. She takes a handful of the clean, dry sphagnum moss that is used for everything from lamp wicks to a crude form of toilet paper. It's highly absorbent and naturally antiseptic. She packs this into the wound over the poultice. Then comes the strangest part of all. She reaches up to the smoky rafters and with a stick carefully gathers a thick, dusty clump of spiderwebs. She lays this gossamer sheet over the moss. The fine threads will help the blood to clot and will form a surprisingly strong, breathable barrier over the wound. Finally, she binds the entire dressing tightly with a long strip of clean linen. Your hand is now a throbbing, bulky package. The immediate crisis is over. The bleeding has stopped. But the real battle, the one against the invisible invaders, has just begun. For the next few days, you are in a state of limbo. You are relieved of heavy two-handed labor, but you are not allowed to be idle. You are a liability and your worth has plummeted. You are put to work on one-handed tasks, turning a small hand mill to grind barley, a monotonous and painful job. Watching the goats to make sure they don't wander into the woods. Sitting by the fire and feeding it sticks. You can feel the eyes of the others on you. You are damaged goods. Leif in particular watches you with his calculating gaze. He is weighing the cost of your food against the value of your diminished labor. You have to get better, quickly. Every throb from your bandaged hand is a source of fresh panic. Is that the dull ache of healing or the sharp, insistent pulse of infection? You become hyper-aware of your own body. You are terrified to fall asleep and terrified to wake up. This new vulnerability makes you notice the general state of health around you. It is by your standards appalling. You notice the way most of the adults have teeth worn down to yellow nubs, ground away by the grit from the stone hand mills that gets into the flour. You see a man about your age, one of the Carls, walking with a permanent limp from a badly healed broken leg. One evening you listen to Bjorn's son, a boy of about 10, crying for hours from the agony of a toothache, a misery for which there is no remedy but to wait for the tooth to rot and fall out. Life is a constant attritional struggle against pain. You see more of Astrid's folk medicine. You see her give a tea made from the leaves of the angelica plant to a woman suffering from a racking cough. You learn that this plant, Angelica archangelica, is one of their most precious medicinal herbs, a cure-all for ailments of the stomach and lungs. Astrid cultivates a small protected patch of it in her garden, and its use is reserved for the most serious cases. Your simple cut does not warrant the use of the precious angelica. You also learn something about their concept of cleanliness. One afternoon, the entire household prepares for the weekly bath. This is Lagerdagur Saturday, literally washing day. You had thought of these people as filthy, but you learn they have a regular bathing ritual that made them seem like obsessive neat freaks to other Europeans of the era. The process, however, is a demonstration of the social hierarchy. Your job, along with the other thralls, is to haul endless buckets of water from the stream to fill several massive wooden tubs. Then you must heat dozens of large stones in a bonfire until they are glowing hot, and then use wooden tongs to carry them to the tubs where they are dropped in, to heat the water with a great hiss and cloud of steam. The bathing order is a perfect illustration of the social ladder. Hrolf and his family go first in the hottest, cleanest water. Then come the high-status Carls and their families. Then the lower-status freemen. Finally, hours later when the water is gray, lukewarm, and full of other people's grime, the thralls are allowed their turn. As you sink into the tepid water, the experience is less about getting clean and more about understanding your place. It's a bath, yes, but it is also a ritual of submission. 3 days after your injury, Astrid decides it is time to change the dressing. This is the moment of truth. You sit before her, your heart hammering against your ribs. She carefully unwraps the linen strip, her movement slow and deliberate. She peels away the layer of spiderwebs and moss. You hold your breath. The wound is an ugly, puckered gash. The skin around it is red and swollen. It is hot to the touch. It is infected. Astrid clicks her tongue in annoyance. She presses lightly on the side of the cut, and a thick yellowish pus oozes out. A wave of nausea and despair washes over you. This is it. This is how it starts. You have seen Finian's recovery and assumed it was the norm. Now you are faced with the terrifying possibility that his was the exception. Astrid's methods now become more aggressive. She cleans the wound again with the sour ale, a process that is even more agonizing than the first time. She then prepares a new poultice, this one containing a different, stronger-smelling herb. She redresses it, but this time the binding is tighter. Before she lets you go, she forces you to drink a cup of a dark, incredibly bitter tea. It tastes like bile and boiled weeds, and you gag as you force it down. That night, the fever starts. It begins as a simple chill, a coldness that has nothing to do with the drafty longhouse. You huddle in your straw pile, wrapping your cloak tightly around you, but you can't get warm. Then the shivering begins, great racking convulsions that shake your entire body. Your teeth chatter uncontrollably. You are vaguely aware of the life of the longhouse continuing around you. The fire, the conversations, the evening meal. No one brings you a bowl of grot. The sick who cannot work do not eat. This is the brutal logic of survival. As the night wears on, the chills give way to a burning heat. Your skin is on fire. The longhouse, the smoky air, the sleeping bodies, it all recedes into a blurry, nightmarish dreamscape. You are adrift in a sea of pain and confusion. Your infected hand throbs in time with the frantic beating of your heart. You drift in and out of consciousness. Sometimes you are aware of Astrid forcing more of the bitter tea between your lips. Once you think you see Leif standing over you, his face impassive in the firelight, before he turns and walks away. Your mind plays tricks on you. You see flashes of your old life, fluorescent lights, the screen of a computer, the face of a loved one, and the loss is so profound, it feels like a physical blow. This is the crucible. The battle is no longer fought with poultices and herbs, but deep within your own cells. Your 21st century immune system, which has been sheltered from this level of pathogenic assault, is now fighting for your life against ancient aggressive microbes. You lose all track of time. It could be one night, it could be 3. Your world is reduced to a cycle of shivering, burning, and a thirst so profound it feels as if your throat has turned to dust. Then one morning you wake up and something is different. The fire in your veins has been banked. The shivering has stopped. You are drenched in sweat, your straw bedding soaked through, but you are no longer burning. The fever has broken. You are weak, weaker than you have ever been. You feel hollowed out as if you have been scraped clean on the inside. You lift your head and look at your hand. Astrid is there as if she was waiting. She unwraps the bandage one more time. The swelling has gone down. The redness has faded. The wound is still a nasty-looking gash, but it is closing. It is healing. A scab has formed. You have won. Or rather, your body has. Astrid looks at the wound, then at your face. For the first time, you see something other than practicality in her eyes. It might be a flicker of surprise or even a hint of respect. You were a damaged tool that she thought she might have to discard. But you have been repaired. She gives a short, satisfied grunt and hands you a small bowl of thin, watery porridge. It is the most delicious thing you have ever tasted. The next week is one of slow recovery. You graduate from watery porridge to the regular grot. You are put back on light duty, your movements slow and deliberate. The wound slowly heals, knitting itself together until all that remains is a thick, puckered, silver-white scar across your palm, a permanent reminder of your brush with death, a brand that marks you as a survivor of this place. The experience changes you. It leaves you with a profound and humbling respect for the simple, miraculous resilience of the human body. It also changes your status within the household just slightly. You are no longer just the strange thrall from the woods. You are the one who had the festering wound, the one Astrid saved. You have been a recipient of her considerable skill. This forges a strange, unspoken bond between you. You have taken up her time and her resources, and by surviving, you have validated her efforts. Your existence is now in a small way intertwined with her reputation as a healer. You are still a thrall, but you are no longer entirely an outsider. You are a part of the Longhouse's history of survival. The scar on your palm has become a part of you, a silver map of where you've been. It's not just a reminder of your fragility, it's a passport of sorts. In a world where stories are etched into skin and scars and tattoos, you now have your first mark. You've survived the wound, the fever. You've proven yourself to be more than a fragile 21st century piece of glass. You're resilient, and resilience is respected here. The change in how people treated you was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Bjorn stopped calling you all thumbs. Occasionally, he even muttered a curt greeting as he passed you in the morning. Gunnar, the arrogant young man, had seen your scar and asked through a combination of disjointed words and gestures what had happened. When you recounted the simple story of the sliding knife, he nodded with a new seriousness. He had been hurt, too. This was a shared experience. You had joined a club you had never wanted to be a part of, the Survivors Club. Most importantly, Leaf begins to assign you tasks that require a higher level of trust, no longer just mindless manual labor. One day, he takes you to the barn, a small, sturdy structure that houses the farm's real wealth grain, cured pelts and trade items. He points to the stacked piles of sealskins and fox furs and, in a matter-of-fact tone, begins to show you how to sort them. This is a job that requires judgment. He shows you the difference between the thick, luxurious, most valuable winter fur and the thinner summer fur. He teaches you to look for flaws. Tears, bald spots, signs of disease. You spend your days in the cool, musky air of the warehouse, your hands running over the soft fur. You are handling treasure. A mistake in sorting could cost Rolf silver in a trade. That Leaf entrusts this job to you as slave is a remarkable sign of trust. He is betting on your wits rather than your strength. He has seen you watch, and now he is testing you to see what you have learned. A few weeks after you recovered, preparations for Hrolf and life's journey began in earnest. The energy in the settlement changed. There was excitement, anticipation, but also an underlying tension. Men were leaving. They would face dangers at sea and dangers from other men. Some might not return. You are tasked with helping prepare the longship. The ship, which you learn is called Sjor Ormar, or Sea Serpent, is no longer a static object in the bay. It is pulled into shallow water, and the work begins. You are assigned one of the dirtiest and most important jobs, resealing the hull. You spend days beneath the warped hull, using iron tools to scrape away old barnacles and seaweed. Then comes the tar. You take hot, steaming pine pitch from a pot and smear it across the planks with rags tied to sticks. It's hot, smelly work, and you end each day with tar stains on your hair and skin. But it also gives you an intimacy with the ship. You feel its every curve, every joint. You see the old scars on its hull, the repairs from previous voyages. You understand that this ship is more than just a vehicle. It's a living thing, a member of the family, a veteran, who has carried these men to victory and brought them home safely. You're helping it armor itself for the battle to come. You help load the ship, too. You carry barrels of salted cod, sacks of barley, coils of rope, and barrels of fresh water. You see the men carrying their weapons. Round shields painted in bright colors are mounted along the sides of the ship, forming a gleaming wall of defense. There are sharpened battle axes, iron-tipped spears, and longswords sheathed in leather scabbards. Bjorn carries a huge double-bladed axe that looks impossible to lift, but he swings it with ease. Leif has a sword with a silver hilt and a yew-bow as tall as he is. The night before they set out, there was a feast. This was no ordinary supper. The finest pigs were slaughtered and roasted over a huge fire. Casks of the finest beer were opened. The air in the great hall was thick with laughter, boasting, and singing. Hrolf, in his role as the generous patriarch, made sure that everyone's cups were kept full. Even the slaves were given an extra portion of roast meat and a mug of weak beer. At the feast, a bard, a skald, stands up. He is an old man with a white beard and bright eyes. He does not sing happy songs. He tells a story, a saga. He tells of the deeds of gods and legendary heroes, his voice rising and falling in rhythm with the story. You do not understand all the words, but you grasp the plot: battles, dragons, broken oaths, and glorious deaths. You see the men, even hardened warriors like Bjorn, listening with childlike, rapt attention. This is their history, their entertainment, and their moral compass, all wrapped up in one. You realize that in a culture without books, the storyteller is the keeper of the tribe's memories. The next morning, the entire settlement gathered on shore to see them off. The women, led by Astrid, kept their faces stoic, hiding their anxiety behind a mask of resilience. The children waved, too excited by the sight to comprehend the dangers. The men, about 15 of them, climbed aboard the Sea Serpent. Hrolf stood at the helm. Leif stood at the prow, his keen eyes scanning the horizon. With a shout, they pushed off the shore. The men took up long oars and began rowing, their strokes perfectly synchronized. The longship slid out of the bay, its snake-shaped bow cutting through the clear blue water. When they reached more open water, they hoisted the square sails dyed red and white in vertical stripes. The wind filled the sails and the ship gathered speed, heading out to sea. They did not wave goodbye, the men did not look back. Over the next few weeks, life in the settlement grew quieter but also more tense. The burden of work fell on those who remained. Astrid ran the farm with an iron fist, making sure nothing was neglected. You, along with Finian and the other slaves, worked from dawn to dusk to keep things going. One day, an unexpected event broke the routine. A merchant ship, a different type of ship called a nar, sailed into the bay. It was unlike the longship. It was wider, deeper, and built for carrying cargo rather than for fighting. Its captain, a man from Denmark, knew Hrolf and came to trade. This was a rare opportunity to see the world beyond this isolated settlement. The ship was loaded with goods you would never see here: exquisite ceramics from the Rhineland, colorful glass beads, and swords made of better steel than the local smiths could produce. In return, the Danes wanted what Hrolf had: furs, sealskins, and walrus tusks hunted from the far north. You are tasked with helping carry their sorted cargo from the warehouse to the boat. As you work, you listen. You hear Leif, who has stayed behind since Hrolf never left the farm completely without a military leader, and the Danish captain haggle. They argue over prices in friendly but firm tones. You learn the vocabulary of trade. A top-quality winter fox fur is worth as much as a fine woolen cloak. A walrus tusk can be traded for a sword. This is their global economy, a network that connects these remote fjords to the rich markets of England, France, and even Constantinople. You see something on the Danish ship that makes you freeze. It's a man, a slave like you, but he's not Norse Celtic or Slavic. He's African. He was probably captured in Spain or North Africa, sold to a merchant, and somehow ended up here on the edge of the known world. He's living proof of how extensive the Viking network was. Historians still debate the extent of Viking interaction with the Muslim world, but looking at this man's tired, lost face, you know that those interactions weren't always peaceful. The trade concluded and the Nar sailed away. Its presence left you with a sense of unease. This settlement was not the whole world. It was just a small dot on a vast map. There were other cities, other kingdoms, other cultures out there. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. One afternoon, a few weeks later, the watchman on the hilltop blew a long, loud horn. A ship had been spotted. People poured out of the hall, shielding their eyes as they looked out to sea. Was it the sea serpent or a raider? As the ship drew closer, they recognized a familiar shape. It was Hrolf returning. But something was wrong. The sails were torn in several places. Some of the shields on the ship's side were broken, and when they got close enough to count the number of people on board, a hush fell over the crowd. They had left with 15. They had returned with 12. The longship docked in solemn silence. The men stepped off the ship, their faces weary and haggard. Bjorn had a fresh bandage on his arm. Others had cuts and bruises. They carried 3 bodies wrapped in sailcloth. They succeeded. They brought back booty silver jewels and a few terrifying-looking new slaves. But they paid a price. There was no celebration that evening. The air in the great hall was heavy with grief. Astrid and the other women who had lost loved ones wept silently. Hrolf sat in his high chair staring into the fire, his face a granite mask. You learn the pieces of the story. They raided a rich but well-defended monastery on the Northumbrian coast. The fighting was fierce. 3 men fell. One of them was Kalin, the young man who had argued with Gunnar. Seeing the cost of Viking violence firsthand, you feel a chill. This is not an adventure. This is a bloody business. Survival on this farm depends not only on the harvest and fishing, but also on the success of these violent expeditions. Hrolf's wealth, the safety of the settlement, even the bowl of porridge you eat are all bought with the blood of others. You have seen the world beyond the fjords both through the eyes of a merchant and a warrior. It is much larger, more complex, and more dangerous than you ever imagined. You are no longer just a slave trying to survive from day to day. You are a cog in a much larger machine, one fueled by trade exploration and ruthless violence. And that machine is hungry. The return of the sea serpent left a scar not only on the skin of the men, but on the soul of the entire settlement. 3 men were dead. Grief hung heavy over them, and beneath it the seeds of unease began to grow. Kalin, one of the fallen, had a family in a fjord 2 days' sail away. A strong and proud family who could not bear the cost of the raid quietly. In this world, blood demanded blood. Honor was a hungry beast and it had to be fed. You notice the change first in Leaf. He becomes quieter, his eyes constantly scanning the trees as if expecting a threat to emerge from the mist. He spends hours training the young men who did not participate in the raid, his usual patience replaced by a fierce urgency. The clanging of wooden swords and shields echoes throughout the settlement, an ominous soundtrack to your daily chores. A week later, a lone traveler, a trapper on his way to the southern markets, stopped at the farm for the night. As he sat by the fire sharing news and gossip you while serving beer, listened intently. He spoke of Kalin's family. He said they were angry not with the Northumbrians who had killed Kalin, but with Hrolf. They believed that Hrolf had risked the lives of their loved ones in a raid for personal gain. They spoke of reparations, or revenge. After the trapper left, the atmosphere became heavy. Hrolf scoffed at the threat, declaring that Kalin's family were barking dogs that dared not bite. But Leif was not so sure. He said nothing. But the next day, the work of the settlement changed. The work of repairing nets and preparing the fields was put aside. Every man capable of holding a weapon was assigned to military duty. Hrolf's settlement was built for defense. The Great Hall was on high ground with a commanding view of the fjord. It was surrounded by a sturdy palisade of sharpened wooden posts. But Leif was not satisfied. He ordered his men to repair any weak spots. You spent 2 days helping dig a shallow trench outside the palisade under his direction. The work was tiring, but as you watched the obstacle take shape, you understood the wisdom of it. Anyone attacking would have to slow down, exposing themselves to spears from behind the palisade. Preparation heightens fear. It turns a distant threat into an imminent possibility. You see the women led by Astrid stocking every available container with water and preparing clean linen bandages. They have been through this before. Their methodical calm is more terrifying than the panic. As a slave, your place in the coming crisis is uncertain. You are not a warrior. You have no blood loyalty to this family. In theory, you could easily flee into the woods during the chaos. But were to starve alone in the woods, or to be captured by raiders and sold to a master who is even worse, you realize a harsh truth: your safety, your survival is now tied to the survival of your captors. They are not your family, but this is your home. The only home you have. A few days later it happened. You are outside helping Finian fix a broken cartwheel when a horn sounds from the lookout on the hilltop. It is not a long blast signaling a friendly ship. It is a series of short, frantic blasts, a brassy cry of panic. For a moment, everything froze. Finian raised his head, his eyes wide with an all-too-familiar horror. Then chaos erupted. Leif was the first to react. Inside into the great hall, he roared, his voice cutting through the beginning of the shouting. Warriors to the fence. You don't need to be told twice. You run along with the women, children, and other slaves toward the relative safety of the great hall. As you run, you glance out across the fjord. 2 longships, their prows carved with fierce wolf heads, are approaching the shore. Their shields are not the motley colors of a merchant crew. They are painted uniformly in black and red. This is a war army. You burst through the doors of the great hall, and Bjorn, who is guarding the entrance, slams the heavy oak doors shut and drops a huge crossbar into place. You are trapped inside. The air in the great hall is thick with fear. Children are crying. Astrid is barking orders, directing the women to their posts, some with buckets of water, others with spare spears. Your role in this battle is that of a supporter. You are a pair of hands, a capable body. You are tasked with helping an old woman block the low windows with woolen sacks and old animal skins. Through a crack, you can see the battle begin. You see Leif and about 20 of Hrolf's men forming a crude shield wall behind the palisade, blocking the main gate. They are not an army, but a band of armed farmers and fishermen. Facing them, nearly 50 warriors pour out of longships, shouting taunts and challenges. Their leader, a large man in a steel helmet with a nose guard, shouts Hrolf's name, calling him a coward and an oathbreaker. This is Kalin's family. This is revenge. The attack began like a storm. A flurry of arrows flew over the fence. Most of them lodged harmlessly in the ground or the wooden wall, but a scream let you know someone had been hit. Then the attackers charged forward, hitting the fence in multiple places at once. The noise was terrible. It was a symphony of hell. The screams of men, the growls of effort, the sharp clash of steel against steel, and the wet thud of axes against wood and bone. Through your slits you saw shadows moving, glimpses of brutal violence. You saw Bjorn standing at the gate, his great axe swinging in a deadly arc, each swing a terrifying noise. The attackers were outnumbered. They breached the fence at a weak spot. The fight spilled into the grounds. Leif shouted a command, and the defenders fell back, fighting their way back to the great hall, turning the open space into a death trap. Now the fight was taking place just outside the walls. You could hear ghast curses and heavy footsteps on the ground. A heavy thump sounded above your head, followed by another. Fire arrows. Some of them were tied to oil-soaked rags. They began to smoke the thick, wet grass roof. Water. Astrid screamed. A chain of buckets formed. You found yourself taking heavy buckets of water from the women and handing them to a nimble boy who climbed the rafters and poured water over the smoldering spots through the smoke vents. Hot steam and smoke poured down, stinging your eyes and burning your throat. The heat from above was terrifying. Being trapped in a burning inferno was the worst fear of everyone in the hall. In the chaos, one of the window panels is broken by the attacker's axe. A scarred warrior, eyes wild with bloodlust, crawls through. He comes face to face with you and the old woman you are helping. Time seemed to slow down. You were unarmed, save for your own fear. The warrior smirked, raising his bloody axe. He looked at you as if you were an insect. In a moment of pure desperation, your survival brain kicked in. Beside you was a small cauldron of boiling water used to put out the fire. You don't think. You act. You grab the cauldron with both hands, ignoring the scorching heat on your palms, and throw the entire contents of the boiling water into the attacker's face. He screamed a horrifying, inhuman scream of agony as his skin blistered instantly. He dropped his axe, clutched his ruined face, and stumbled back through the window. He was gone. You stand there shaking, uncontrollably, your heart pounding like a trapped bird. Your breath is ragged. You have just horribly wounded a man. You could have killed him. The fact makes you sick to your stomach. The old woman looks at you, her eyes wide with shock, and then she nods emphatically. You saved their lives. The battle outside was reaching its climax. The attackers were trying to break down the main door using a large log as a club. The sound of it crashing shook the hall. Bjorn and the others were fending it off from the inside, but the wood was beginning to crack. Then another horn sounded. Another horn. Hrolf's horn. He had stayed behind a tactic Leif must have planned. He and a small group of his best warriors had hidden in the woods. Now they attacked the attackers from behind, sandwiching them between the main hall and Hrolf's forces. The screams outside changed. The attackers' triumphant anger turned to panic and pain. Attacked from both sides, their formation broke. The assault had failed. The battle subsides into isolated skirmishes and then complete silence save for the groans of the dying. A moment later, you hear Hrolf's voice from outside. "Open the door." The beam was lifted and the door opened, revealing a gruesome scene. The ground was plowed and smeared with blood. Nearly a dozen bodies, friends and foes, lay strewn across the ground in grotesque poses of death. Fences were broken. The smell of blood and smoke hung heavy in the air. The survivors entered tired and bloody. Hrolf had a gash on his forehead. Bjorn was panting, leaning on his axe. Leif seemed unharmed, but his face was drawn and tired. The shock of battle gave way to the grim aftermath. Astrid and the women became battlefield nurses. They did not scream or cry. They went to work tearing linen into bandages, bringing clean water, and checking on the wounded. You were called. Not by Astrid, but by Leif. He pointed to a young warrior sitting against the wall, trying to hold his intestines with both hands. "Hold him," Leif commanded. You kneel in the mud and blood and hold the young man's shoulders while Astrid, with a bone needle and sinew thread, begins to stitch the horrific wound roughly. The young man screams, and you hold on tighter, whispering meaningless words of comfort you didn't know you knew. You are no longer a bystander. You are participating in the desperate effort to hold life together. That night, after the wounded had been tended to and your dead had been ceremoniously brought in, you were given a spear and told to stand guard at the makeshift barricade. The spear felt heavy and unfamiliar in your hand. The scar on your palm tingled. You look out over the quiet fjord where enemy ships have disappeared. One was captured, the other escaped with its survivors. You look into the darkness of the forest and listen to the sounds of the night. You have faced the violence that has shaped this era not from a book, but in blood and fire. You have not fought as a warrior, but you have defended this home. You have killed one man to save another. You stand there under the cold stars, a slave holding a spear guarding your masters. But something has changed. Your survival is no longer your own. It is tied to this land, to these people, to this smoky, bloody hall. You are a part of it now. You have survived the raid, and in that survival you have found a place, however fearful and precarious in this wild world. The aftermath of the raid was not an event, but a season. It lingered in the air, a bitter taste like smoke from a fire that would not die. The dead were buried. Hrolf's men were placed in graves marked with boulders along with their weapons, so they could enter the afterlife as warriors. The attackers were left in an unmarked mass grave, a final humiliation for those who had broken the peace. The survivors' wounds slowly healed, leaving new scars, new stories etched into their skin. You had played a small but undeniable role in the defense of this house. Your actions with the boiling cauldron had become a small story, told with a touch of dark humor around the fire. You were not hailed as a hero, your status did not permit it, but you were recognized. Bjorn, whose arm had been wounded in the battle, had slapped you roughly on the back, a gesture that nearly knocked you over but oddly meant approval. Leif, in a quiet moment, had handed you a small old knife. It was not a gift, but an acknowledgement. No one should be toothless, he had muttered, and that was all. But now you had a blade of your own, a tool, a weapon, a symbol that you were no longer completely helpless. But as the wounds of battle began to fade, another enemy, a much larger one, began to gather its forces on the horizon. It was an enemy that no shield wall could stop, no axe could defeat. It was winter. You notice it first in the light. The sun, lazy in the summer, now seems to struggle harder to climb the sky. Every day its arc is lower, its light weaker, a pale yellow rather than a bright yellow. Evenings come earlier and mornings linger in the darkness longer. There's a new sharpness to the air, a chill that seeps through your woolen coat and settles deep in your bones. The birches drop their leaves, leaving behind silvery white skeletons against the gray sky. Then the first snow fell. It was not a blizzard, but a gentle, almost hesitant sleet one afternoon. Large, wet flakes drifted down from the silent sky, melting as they hit the ground. But they were the vanguard of an army to come. Within a week, the ground was covered with a thin layer of snow, crunchy underfoot. The fjord, once a deep blue, was black and cold, the cliffs around it covered with snow. The life of the settlement shrank. Work outside became a desperate race against the encroaching darkness and cold. The most important task was firewood. Every able-bodied man was sent into the forest to chop, split, and haul logs. The great hall, already consumed by the vast quantities of wood, became a ravenous beast, devouring wood to keep its fiery heart beating. You spent your days pulling the heavy sleds, your muscles straining from the effort, your breath forming thick clouds in the cold air. Food had to be preserved. The last batches of cod were salted and hung on racks in the smoky warehouse. The last vegetables, turnips, carrots, and onions were harvested from the frozen garden and stored in underground vats. Astrid oversaw this with the anxiety of a general preparing for a siege. She knew that every turnip that rotted, every fish that spoiled was a step closer to starvation. Then winter really came. It came like a blizzard from the north, a wall of white that roared across the fjord. The wind howled like a haunted wolf, whipping snow into towering drifts that obscured even the lowest windows of the great hall. For 3 days, the outside world disappeared. All that remained was the howling wind and the darkness of the great hall. Life was now entirely indoors. The great hall was no longer a house, it was a universe. It was a wooden ship stranded in a sea of ice. Its population had swelled as the most precious animals, cows, a few sheep and goats, were brought inside to protect them from the deadly cold. They were housed at one end of the great hall, and their smell became part of the already stifling atmosphere. For you accustomed to privacy, to personal space, this experience is a shock. Nearly 40 people and a dozen animals live, eat, sleep, and exist in a single space. There is no place to be alone. Every action is observed. Every conversation is overheard. Every cough, every snore, every cry of a child is public property. Time lost its meaning. Day and night merged into one long cycle of darkness and faint light. Life was marked not by the sun, but by the routines of the hall. Waking up in the cold darkness, feeding the cattle, eating a breakfast of porridge and salted fish. Then the long, empty hours. Work became a salve, a way to combat boredom and claustrophobia. Men spent hours repairing tools, weapons, and leather harnesses. They sat on benches, their fingers deft and patient, the light from the fire glinting off their knives. Bjorn, whose arm had healed, spent weeks carving a new axe handle from a single ash log, the intricate shapes of fighting beasts slowly emerging from the wood. The women were busy. The rhythmic thump-thump of Astrid's upright loom was the heartbeat of winter. She and the other women wove yards of wool, turning the rough piles of wool that you helped clean into the thick fabrics that would become cloaks, tunics, and blankets. Other women sat spinning on freewheels, their fingers never resting, turning clouds of wool into sturdy spools of thread. Your role in this domestic ecosystem is a humble one. You help feed the animals and clean their pens. You turn a hand mill a monotonous, tiresome task that grinds barley into coarse flour for the daily meal. You learn to make tallow candles, creating smoky, fetid lights that help push back the darkness a little. But the real enemy of winter isn't cold or darkness. It's confinement. As the weeks turn into months, tensions begin to show. Small irritations that would have been overlooked in the summertime become acute. Quarrels erupt over trivial matters, a seat too close to the fire, a misread remark. Even the best-natured become irritable and short-tempered. The great hall, once a place of refuge, begins to feel like a prison. To counteract this madness, they had stories. On long evenings after dinner, when the wind was howling outside, everyone would gather around the fire, and someone would tell a story. Sometimes it was Hrolf recounting past raids, victories, and narrow escapes. Sometimes it was one of the old women retelling tales of foolish giants and cunning elves. Leif, you discover, is a master storyteller. But he doesn't tell stories of gods or battles. He tells riddles. He'll pose a tricky question to the hall, and everyone will argue and guess the answer. I have a mouth but never speak. He would begin, his voice low and clear in the silence. I have a bed but never sleep. I am always running but never walk. The hall would be silent for a moment, then the guessing would begin. A wolf, one boy would say. A ghost, another would suggest. Leif would just shake his head, a small smile playing on his lips. Finally, someone would guess correctly, a river, and a sigh of satisfaction would ripple through the hall. These riddles were more than entertainment. They were exercises for the mind, a way to keep the mind sharp while the body was confined. You also learn about one of their unique winter activities. On a rare day when the storm has passed and the sun shines weakly on a snow-covered world, Leif announces that they are going skiing. He pulls out his skis, long wooden skis that curve upward at the front. They are tied to their boots with leather straps. You've never seen anything like it. Leif shows you how to use a long stick for balance and propulsion. Your first attempt is a disaster. You stumble and fall into a pile of soft snow to the laughter of the others. But you learn quickly. You learn to glide across the snow, moving with surprising speed and ease. They use skis to hunt and trap in the winter, turning the otherwise impassable landscape into a playground. Gliding through the silent woods, the cold air on your face, you feel a sense of exhilarating freedom, a temporary reprieve from the stuffiness of the great hall. As midwinter approached, supplies began to run low. The barrels of salted fish were getting smaller. The firewood pile seemed to be shrinking at an alarming rate. Astrid began rationing food, each meal getting a little smaller. The underlying anxiety in the great hall became more apparent. People looked at the stockpiles with concern. Historians debate the impact of the Little Ice Age on this era, but for those who lived through it, the struggle was undeniable. A longer than usual winter, a late spring, could mean disaster. Tensions came to a head one night when one of the dairy cows fell ill. She lay in her stall, refusing to eat. Her breathing labored. Losing a cow would be a devastating blow. She provided milk, butter, and cheese, vital sources of fat and protein. Rolf and Leif stood over the animal, their faces grim. Astrid tried every herbal remedy she knew, but nothing worked. The bull died at dawn. The sadness in the hall was palpable. It was more than the loss of an animal. It was a chink in their armor, a reminder that they were on the brink. That evening, dinner was silent and somber. In that silence, you did something daring. You spent weeks watching Bjorn carve his axe handle. You saw how he used his small knife to create intricate shapes. In the hours of boredom, you took scraps of wood and tried to imitate him. Your first attempts were crude, but you persisted. You take out a small piece of wood you have been working on. On it you have carved a crude but recognizable image. It is a long ship with billowing sails and shields on its sides. It is the sea serpent. You quietly stood up, walked over to one of Bjorn's children, a girl of about 6, who was sitting sadly by the fire, and handed her the small toy. The girl took it, her eyes wide with wonder. She ran her little fingers over the carving. A bright smile spread across her face. She looked at her friend, then at her father. Bjorn had watched the whole thing. He looked at the toy, then at her. He didn't smile, but the usual contempt in his eyes was gone. He nodded slowly, a gesture of acknowledgement. For a moment you broke the gloom. You created something not out of necessity, but out of joy. You brought a small ray of light into the darkness. It was a small act, but in the confinement of winter, small acts carry great weight. And then slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. One afternoon you noticed that the light coming through the chimney seems to last a little longer. A few days later you hear a sound you haven't heard in months, dripping water. The ice hanging from the eaves is starting to melt. An uncontrollable excitement spread throughout the great hall. People began to fidget, eager. They stood near the door, sniffing the air, trying to smell the change. Then one day Hrolf opened the heavy door and a gentle breeze blew in. It did not carry the biting cold of winter. It carried a new scent, the smell of damp earth of awakening life. People poured outside, squinting against the bright sunlight reflecting off the snow. The world was still white, but there were patches of dark earth where the snow had melted. The sky was a brilliant blue. Winter was broken. The siege was over. They had survived. You stood there breathing deeply, feeling the faint warmth of the sun on your face. You had faced the greatest enemy of this land, not an army of war, but the endless darkness and cold, and you had endured. You had entered the hall in the fall as a frightened outsider. You had emerged in the spring as a survivor, part of this small, resilient community. You were still a slave, but you had found a place. You had carved it for yourself with sweat, with blood, and with a small wooden boat. Spring comes like a promise fulfilled. The snow and ice retreat, leaving a world of brown and gray, but a world ready for life. The ground softens again. The first green shoots, strong and defiant, push through the dead leaves of last autumn. Birds sing again, and the air carries the scent of thawed earth and new beginnings. The energy of the settlement shifted. The suffocation of winter was replaced by a burst of activity. Fields where plowed boats launched and sod roofs repaired. There was a sense of optimism, a collective belief that they had survived the worst. They had faced raiders in winter and they had prevailed. Little did they know that a greater, more subtle threat was on the way. Not with swords and fire, but with words and an idea. It arrived on a merchant ship from Denmark, a bulky gnar laden with spring necessities seeds, salt and iron bars for blacksmiths to work in. Along with the ship was a man named Fingir Hrolf's cousin, returning from 2 years in the kingdom of Northumbria, where he had served in the squire of an English lord. The return of a loved one is cause for celebration. Fingir is greeted warmly. He is a Viking, no doubt tall blonde, with the blue eyes of the Hrolf family. He hugs his cousins and shares stories of his adventures in a foreign land. But as the dust settles, you begin to notice something different about Fingir. He was dressed like a Norse, but his tunic was a little more finely tailored, and dyed a rich dark blue you wouldn't see here. More importantly, he wore 2 amulets around his neck. One was a silver Thor's hammer, familiar and reassuring. The other, lying right next to it, was a simple silver cross. The presence of the cross caused a quiet stir. Hrolf regarded it with undisguised disdain. Bjorn squinted at it suspiciously, as if it were some kind of dangerous talisman. Only Leif regarded it with a cold, unjudgmental curiosity. The differences did not end there. At supper that evening, when Hrolf poured a great horn of beer and offered it to Thor before drinking, Fingir bowed his head silently for a moment. his lips moving in a prayer that no one could hear. He did not participate in the offering. Then he began to talk about his God, the God of the Christians. He talked about one God, the creator of everything more powerful than all the other gods put together. He talked about the son of that God who was called Jesus Christ, who came to earth as a human being. And he was a great warrior? Bjorn asked, clearly trying to understand. How many giants did he kill? He is not a warrior in that way, Fingir said patiently. He does not kill anyone. Instead, he lets his enemies kill him. The hall fell silent, followed by scornful laughter. Bjorn laughed the loudest. A god who lets himself be killed. By mortals, that is a god for slaves and cowards. Our god dies in battle. He died to take on the sins of all, Fingir tried to explain. And after 3 days he rose from the dead stronger than before. This only added to the confusion. A god who could resurrect the dead was a powerful concept, but the idea of voluntary sacrifice was completely foreign. Their religion was about strength, honor, and victory. This new religion seemed to be about humility, forgiveness, and submission. For you listening from the shadows as you cleaned the wooden bowls, Fingir's words had a different impact. You came from a largely secular world, but you had grown up with Christian stories as part of your cultural fabric. But you had never really listened to them. Now, in the context of this primitive pagan belief, they sounded utterly revolutionary. The meek shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the poor. These were dangerous ideas in a world built on rigid hierarchy. For the first time, you heard a worldview in which your low status was not a curse, but almost a blessing. A small, terrifying hope began to sprout within you. In the following days, Fingir became a source of curiosity and tension. Hrolf largely ignored him, dismissing his new ideas as temporary madness he had contracted abroad. Astrid openly distrusted him, warning that his jealous god might offend the spirits of the land and bring bad luck to the harvest. Leif, however, spent a lot of time with Fingir. You would see them walking together along the beach, engaged in deep conversations. Leif wasn't interested in theology, he was interested in politics. Fingir talked about how the Christian kings of the south were consolidating their power, creating unified kingdoms supported by an organized church. Leif, who had always thought about power and order, listened intently. He began to see Christianity not as a faith, but as a tool for building something larger and more lasting than a farm run by a petty chief. And you watch Finian. You see him treat his slaves not with the usual contempt, but with a strange kind of dignity. He talks to Finian, asks him about his homeland of Ireland, an island that has been Christian for centuries. He even talks to you. One afternoon as you were repairing a broken stool, Fingir approached you. That was a good job, he said, nodding at your hand. He looked at the scar on your palm. You've seen the hardships. Yes, you say surprised by the direct conversation. In my land, he said, his voice low, they say that our gods take special care of those who suffer, that the last in this world will be the first in the next. He looked you straight in the eye. That's a comforting thought for someone in your position, isn't it? You don't know what to say. He speaks as if he understands the abyss of your slavery, not just an economic reality, but a spiritual burden. He's offering you not freedom, but hope, something that could be even more dangerous. The clash between the cross and the hammer came to a head a few weeks later. A blight struck the barley fields. The once green stalks began to show brown spots and their growth was stunted. Astrid performed the usual rituals. A rooster was sacrificed to Freya and its blood was sprinkled on the fields. Hrolf led a solemn prayer to Thor to protect the crops, but the blight continued to spread. Fear began to creep into the settlement. A failed barley harvest meant no beer and not enough bread for the winter. It meant famine. One tense evening in the great hall, as Hrolf stared angrily into the fire, Fingir spoke up. "Your gods do not answer," he said softly, but his words echoed in the silence. "Perhaps you should seek the aid of the god who has proven himself more powerful." "Be quiet," Cousin Hrolf roared. "Do not speak blasphemy in my hall." "Is it blasphemy if it works?" Leif said suddenly. All eyes turned to him. "We did it the old way and it failed. What harm is there in trying a new way? If the god of Fingir has no power, then we lose nothing. If he does, then we will save our crops." Leif's pragmatic intervention changed the situation. Hrolf, caught between tradition and despair, reluctantly agreed. He would not participate in this madness, but he would allow it. The blight persisted, a brown curse on the green fields. The optimism of spring had soured into fear. Hrolf became irritable, his frustration manifesting itself in fits of rage. He berated those who did not work hard enough as if the crop's disease were a personal failure. Then one evening the wind changed. The air grew heavy and still. A bruised purple appeared on the western horizon. "Thor is angry," Bjorn muttered, looking at the gathering clouds. That night the storm hit. It was not like the short, fierce summer storms. This was a long, drawn-out fury. Lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the landscape for ghostly moments, followed by peals of thunder that shook the earth. And then the rain came. Not a nourishing downpour, but a deluge, a relentless wall of water that pounded the roofs and turned the courtyards into a sea of mud. In the great hall, everyone cowered. Every thunderclap was a blow, a reminder of the power of the gods. Hrolf and his men drank heavily from their ale, their defiance a thin cover for their fear. Fingir sat silently, eyes closed, his lips moving in a silent prayer to his own storm god. The storm raged through the night and into the next day. When it finally died down on Monday afternoon, leaving a quiet people went outside to survey the damage. A large tree had been struck in half by lightning. A fence on one side had been blown down by the winds. It looked devastating. But a few days later, as the fields dried, something remarkable happened. The blight had stopped spreading. The worst affected plants remained stunted and sickly, but the new growth nourished by the heavy rain was green and vigorous. The downpour seemed to have washed the disease from the fields. The event becomes a Rorschach test for faith. It is Thor Hrolf declared in the Great Hall that night, his voice ringing with victory and ale. He has heard our prayers, he has brought down his hammer, and quenched the fever of the earth with his storm. We must offer thanksgiving. But the others were not so sure. They looked towards Fingir. "Your god sent rain?" One of the older women said, her voice no longer hostile, but cautiously curious. Fingir shook his head gently. "My God is not a god of storms, but of all creation. He did not send the rain out of anger, but out of mercy. He heard the prayer of one man and showed his power. The ambiguity is perfect. There is no evidence. Who can say whether it was Thor or God who sent the rain? Or perhaps, as you suspect in your heart, it was just rain. A random weather event to which both sides attach divine significance. That ambiguity is more powerful than an obvious miracle. It does not require an immediate conversion of faith. It merely plants a seed, the seed of doubt. It allows people to wonder, and wonder is the first step toward change. In the weeks that followed, a quiet division began to form. Hrolf, true to his word, held a grand thanksgiving ceremony for Thor. A large male goat was sacrificed, and its blood was sprinkled on a stone altar. But the enthusiasm seemed strained. Some of the participants were less devoted than before. Their eyes kept glancing toward Fingir, who stood at the back of the crowd, watching with sad solemnity. A few people, mostly young people or people of lower status, began to seek out Fingir privately. They would ask him questions while they were working in the fields or mending nets. They wanted to know more about this white Christ who cared for the poor and promised an afterlife that did not depend on dying with a sword in hand. In an attempt to diffuse the growing tension, Fingir explained his position more carefully. He told Hrolf and Leif about the preem signing, or first sign. "I am not baptized," he explained as they sat in the great hall. "I have not completely abandoned the old ways. Think of it as a sign of trade. In Christian lands, they distrust those who are not marked with a cross. By performing the preem signing, I have received my first blessing. It allows me to live and trade among them without being considered a devil-worshipping pagan. It opens doors." He pointed to his two amulets. "The hammer is for the world of our ancestors. The cross is for the new world that is coming. A wise man will carry both." Hrolf scoffed at the idea, seeing it as weakness. But Leif was intrigued. He saw the pragmatism in it. This was not surrender, it was accommodation. It was a way to harness the power of a rising culture without completely abandoning his own. Leif began to see Christianity not as a theological threat, but as a strategic opportunity. Amidst this ideological chaos, you find yourself in a unique position. You are the ultimate outsider, unbound by their traditions, and not fully understanding the new faith. One evening, as Fingir sits alone by the sea whittling a piece of wood, you muster up the courage to approach him. "Can I ask you a question?" You said, your voice sounding strange in the quiet air. He looked up, his eyes calm. "Of course." "Your God? If you are all-powerful, why did you let your son die such a shameful death? Why not have a glorious battle?" This was the question that confused Bjorn and the others. Fingir stopped slicing. "Because true power, as I understand it, lies not in causing death, but in overcoming it. Any chieftain can kill his enemies, but only a god can die and rise again to forgive them." He looked at the scar on your palm. "You have been close to death. You know how terrifying it is. Imagine choosing it willingly, not for honor in battle, but out of love for the people who crucified you. That is a different kind of power, isn't it? You sit down, your mind racing. And what is sin, you ask? I heard you say that word. It's when you hurt someone else, or hurt your own soul by acting without honor or kindness," he said simply. "It's when you put yourself above what's right. So all these men are sinners, you say, thinking of the raids, violence, and slavery that shaped this world? We are all sinners," Fingir corrected gently. "That is why we need forgiveness. Even a slave in my God's eyes has a soul as precious as a king's, and a king who acts like a tyrant will face a harsher judgment than a slave who has lived an honest life." This conversation shook you to your core. All your time here, you had accepted the hierarchy of this world as a natural law. Jarl Karl Thrall. It was just the way things worked. Now Fingir had given you a new lens to look through, and the whole structure seemed false, temporary, and potentially broken. It gave you a dizzying sense of hope, but also a deep fear. Hope was a dangerous thing for a slave. It could get you killed. This chapter of your life ends not with a battle or a storm, but with a tense silence. The settlement has found a new balance, a precarious one. Hrolf, to reaffirm his authority and the old traditions, has announced that they will hold a great midsummer ceremony to honor the old gods, larger and more impressive than any before. Leif, meanwhile, continued his silent conversations with Fingir, learning about the law structures and powers of the Christian kingdoms. He was playing a long game of chess, and Fingir he remained a calm and steady presence. He did not argue or preach. He simply lived his faith, and in doing so, he offered an alternative. On the eve of Hrolf's great feast, you stand outside the great hall looking up at the stars. The air is thick with the scent of burning resin and roasting meat. Laughter and song echo from within. It is a world of hammers of earthly power and fierce joy. You see Fingir standing alone at the edge of the firelight, his shadow long and silent. He is looking at those same stars. He represents something else, a world of crosses of inner strength and a distant promise. In that moment, you feel caught between two worlds. You don't quite belong to either. You are an observer, an outsider, a lost soul in an age of great upheaval. The hammer and the cross are wrestling for the soul of this Nordic world, and you stand right on the fault line. The future of the settlement and your own future has never felt more uncertain.